This is Just Ask George, exploring the universe of corporate finance and capital formation for your business enterprise, with merchant banker George Lovato Jr. and your host, David Wolf. Welcome back to Just Ask George. David Wolf, affiliate banker, here with the head dude, George Lovato. George Jr.
Hey, here we are.
Friday again. Sometimes we cut multiple shows on one Friday.
I'll tell you a funny story. Yeah. When I was a kid growing up in San Diego, Fridays were my favorite day of the week.
I love Fridays.
My favorite day.
Do you still like Fridays?
I still love Fridays. I still get that sense, when I'd run home from school and all the guys in the neighborhood, we'd all be happy because we were playing with our G.I. Joes and playing Army and doing all that stuff.
No, it's
and
true. The summers are like that too.
Yeah.
It's just like,
And then it always meant that my mom and dad were going to take my sister and I out to some place. There were like 3 or 4 places we went to continually, but Friday was that night, the Friday night meal, out somewhere. And so now I may sound strange, but I still go home. I get my camouflage on, take my toy guns outside and play.
And check waiter. No, he's beautiful, and that's we love it. We were talking offline. This is a fascinating subject because it's so much a part of the dance we do with our clients to help them succeed and form capital for them. You have said, and I'll just say it out there, I've said it to many of my prospects and clients, the question becomes, well, how long will this take? How long does it take to get my financing, my capital formation? And I say, well, if I were George, and I'm going to channel George, he would answer something like this. This is largely a client-dependent process. And then, of course, I elaborate. For the purposes of this program, you will elaborate.
Yeah, I will elaborate. You hit the nail on the head, and here we have conversation after conversation, and they'll say, when do I get my money? And it's like, okay, it's things have changed. We talked about banking on other shows and so on, but putting an underwriting together and meeting a client's needs sometimes are at opposite ends of the spectrum of one another. And the other thing is we have to spend additionally, and at being at opposite ends of the spectrum, additionally we have to spend a ton of time educating the client along the way. So here we've got a situation where we engage with the client, we give them a document list, and I'll give you some prime examples, several of which you're familiar with. We had a microloan client, and everything was all flowers and roses, and I'm going to be a great client. I'm going to respond quickly. It has been a year since that one microloan you sent us, and we have sent him emails and called him. You've called him. You've emailed him, and he's just saying, "Well, I signed the agreement. I paid the retainer. I'm just not ready yet." And it was a relatively simple transaction and certainly more than doable, but that can happen. That's one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is we'll start the underwriting process, and there might be one very critical document like tax returns or personal financial statements or company statements that don't arrive. And then we'll say, okay, well, why don't you have your tax returns? Well, I just, I haven't filed them, or they'll give us, the other day we were looking at an extension on one client, a personal extension for 2011 and 2012. And we said, I don't know how you can do that, but we really need those tax returns. We've got to have them. And to the extent the reason, that we know why he had extended both those years, and certainly you can't go indefinitely on an extension. There are limits to how far you can go, unless you get special dispensation. There's not much we can do, because the tax return tells us so much about verifies so much about the business. And then you can have this happen, which you're familiar with, and that is We start the underwriting process, and the deal changes.
Right. Sometimes we get a call where the management feels they need A, and it actually ends up being X, Y, and Z. Oftentimes it's not a money problem, it's a management problem. This is a subject we've covered in previous programs. And there's a whole variety of, a range of things that can, and it's dominoes, man. It's
do I look like I need to be medicated?
Sometimes it's the delay of documents just coming in, but sometimes the whole structure of the deal can change.
There's that. There is certainly the cough is back.
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to get one in this show.
Certainly they can delay getting documents in, which that happens 95% of the time. They'll drip in and underwriting pulls its hair out, I pull my hair out, but then the deal changes, and we had a situation with one of our developer clients, and they said, we've got control of the land. And okay, you've got control of the land, and I'm sitting in a room with all the partners, and they're saying, yeah, it's a done deal. We're going to contribute the land to the project. And then as we get through it, they couldn't get control of the land as they expected because they had a difficult seller that they were dealing with. Yeah. And then they weren't, because of other projects that they had going simultaneously, they're a little thin on the cash side. So now we've got to finance the land, and they can come up with some of the cash, obviously, which they need to. Yeah. But now we're getting thrown in that pit.
It starts almost another layer of underwriting.
Yeah. And so, it could be something as dramatic as that. Yeah. And in addition, we were involved in an acquisition in 2011. And the price was set, the purchase agreement was signed, everything's done, boom, bow on it, the whole 9 yards. And dramatically, the business loses a major client.
Right.
And what had happened is the client, that customer for that business had a set of unforeseen circumstances befall them, and they're a very, very large corporation. Everybody knows their name if I mentioned it. And they wound up having to cut a lot of the types of services that my client provided. And as a result of those big drastic cuts, there went roughly 35 to 40% of the billings of that company. Yikes. So then the deal had to be redone because the value of the company changed. The acquisition still went through, but the deal had to be altered pretty dramatically.
Sure.
Okay.
That's a big
And so haircut. There's that type of thing. And then there's just the I can get you all those documents in 3 to 5 days. I don't know how many times I've heard that in 30 years. I can get that done in no more than 5 days. And we're into it 3 weeks later, and we're still waiting. And we're sending emails, and we're updating our CRM, and we're getting all of a sudden they're saying, well, it's more complex than I thought it was. This is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
And I haven't been in the business 30 years, but I've heard it a few times myself. Absolutely.
And so it really comes down to when it sort of shows a lack of sophistication on the part of the client when they say, when is this going to get done? Because they should know that if I've got to wait on you, I can't keep dates that I've told you that we're going to hit.
There's no way we can make a promise. It's back to that kind of guarantee word. It's one form of guarantee that oftentimes is well,
give me a general idea. Yeah. Just tell me about if everything runs as it's supposed to run.
Right.
All right, well, if everything runs as it's supposed to run, it's 30 to 45 days. We should be out of underwriting and be in a position to when we're actually presenting that to our finance partners or we've made a determination on it.
Exactly.
So then that 30 to 45 days comes and 60% of what we requested is still missing, and they're saying, well, I thought we'd be done by now. Mm-hmm. And we've got another development client that we needed very specific information for his feasibility study, and he didn't get it together for 6 months. And it was because he said, I've got the general contractor in place. Everything's committed. It's all priced out. Well, when it came down to it, that general contractor pulled out of the deal. He had to go back and get another one. And that
Wow.
general contractor had to commit to a construction budget, and it took them time. I mean,
Yeah, they
those
had to
things take, you
reconcile.
don't just
Yeah.
look at, a $30 million project and go, there's
Yeah.
the number,
Yeah, you need to go through it line by line.
It took him time, and so then it caused a delay. It's a ripple effect, and then it hurt the timing of the feasibility. Then all the other information that was in there in the underwriting got old, has to be redone.
It's like a domino, folks.
And so he's saying, well, God, why do we have to start over? Well, most of your information now is 9 months old.
Right. By the way.
Yeah, and you held us up for 6.
Yeah.
Okay. So, needless to say, the 3 months that you said was only going to take a week in the very beginning, we went 3 months plus 6 because your contractor fell out. Did you forget that? Well, yeah, but, we just need a more flexible process. I think it's pretty flexible. Those are extreme examples, and that it doesn't always happen. Conversely, we have a client that's involved in an acquisition. The guy's like lightning, and he's a pleasure to work with.
How cool.
He is absolutely a gentleman, and he's really smart. Promod, if you know who I'm talking about. And everything that he's provided to us has been down to the detail we've needed.
How cool is that?
We're and this was a situation, this is an acquisition that has a very short fuse to it. And we took it on knowing that there was going to be a short fuse. But we were very clear with him and said, look, you hold us up one extra week during here, this whole thing can stumble.
Yeah.
He said, it won't happen at my end. And so, we're just about ready to tie a bow on that.
Excellent.
And we're, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. But that's that extreme.
Right.
That is that client that really gets it. He's smart, okay? He's sophisticated. He understands the marketplace, and he knows how it works.
Right.
And he's just an absolute pleasure to work with. Everybody in the company loves him. And we've got lots and lots of clients like that.
Yeah.
We have lots of clients that really respond very, very well.
Right.
They're very timely.
Right.
But there are just some of them that because this becomes an integrative process between us and the client.
Exactly.
He's actively involved in the underwriting process.
Yeah.
He's no longer taking the 3 years tax returns, current financials, turning it over to his banker. There's much more to what actually goes on with specialized lending than ever before. Third-party reports, all these other things that can affect them, and market conditions. I tell this story time and time again, and this is another time that this had changed. We were involved in financing a slew of daycare centers, and it was a tremendously profitable business. And it was one company, it was the David buying the Goliath. And we had it all put together, and we've got a closing date selected, financing's in place. We're just kind of dotting I's and crossing T's, last-minute detail things. Everybody had agreed on the documentation, the structure of the deal. We're ready to close, and all of a sudden, this article comes out in the New York Times, and it's all over the national news about not these daycare centers, but another daycare center system where there was child abuse going on. Yeah. And it just, it impacted, everyone sat back and said, this is tough to put in our portfolio right now.
Yeah, we're just afraid of the exposure.
Yeah. And not that we don't like the deal, but let's just let it cool down a little bit.
That's an external imposed situation that you could not have predicted, and it had nothing to do with the client readiness.
The client, the money, nothing. It's just let's just hold off. And so what wound up happening was the transaction closed, but it closed a little over 6 months later.
All right.
Okay.
Yet another reason why we can't really make a promise about or a guarantee about time frame or predict, because there are too many variables and moving parts. But it's a true partnership, this underwriting process, the way you describe that, where really it's not passing documents under the door, depending on complexity, of course, but
Yeah, it's a client dependent process,
and it's a people. You've said that it's a people, structure. This is the people part of the people.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely. Another great show.
Thanks, George.
Man, I tell you what, you're good.
I love the way he does this. We are Just Ask George. He's George. I'm the guy that does the asking.
Dave, the wingman.
We'll see you next time. Remember, we're at www.bmc.com.
BHCapitalLTD.com.
You like that one?
Hey.
We'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye-bye.
For more information about George Lovato Jr. and BH Capital, visit bhcapitalltd.com. Check out more episodes of Just Ask George at justaskgeorgeradio.com. Just Ask George is produced by Steve Garth and is a production of BH Capital Ltd. All rights reserved.